Hey, this is David Plotz, CEO of CityCast. I have a favor to ask before we get to today's conversation. We're doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it. And even if you took it last year, we'd be grateful if you took it again, because we can't use last year's data. Please go to citycast.fm/survey to take the survey. It's only 7 minutes long, we know, because we timed it. That's citycast.fm/survey. And when you take the survey, you'll also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and CityCast swag, that great CityCast swag. citycast.fm/survey.
In the week since President Trump took office, he's already signed dozens of executive orders and started mass deportations. He's also threatened many of our closest trading partners with tariffs. And if you're anything like me, you're probably asking yourself, how are these incoming tariffs going to impact our economy here in Oregon? So today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with Oregonian business reporter Mike Rogoway to break down which industries might be the most affected by President Trump's plans and how all that could impact our life here in Portland. It's Wednesday, January 29th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Well, before we jump in, can you briefly explain what a tariff is? Because seeing some of the back and forth online, it appears many people don't actually know what they are.
Yeah, so a tariff is a tax on a product or a service that's imported into a country. So, it's somewhat akin, I guess, to a sales tax. They're typically levied in percentage terms. You say, well, we'll have a 10% tax on widgets if the widgets are coming from Fairyland. So every widget that comes from Fairyland, if it sells for $10, well, it'll be $11 now if it's a 10% tax. So
who pays that tariff?
Well, the economists sort of wring their hands over that. Ultimately, the consumer does, but the businesses selling the product can respond by lowering the price if they want and reduce
their profit.
Yeah. So oftentimes, I think in economics, you'd see these things. There's sort of a meeting in the middle that people know, the businesses know what people will pay. Now, if the tariff applies to everybody, if all the widgets in the world come from Fairyland and there's no other place to get them, then probably all the prices will go up. But if you can get, widgets from Fairyland or from the land of Oz, and there's no tariff on the products from Oz, well, the people from Fairyland are probably going to have to lower their prices or nobody's going to buy their widgets.
Okay. So that's the hope in a sense.
Yeah, I would say we live in Kansas and we've got products coming to us from Fairyland and from the land of Oz that both have a 10% tariff on them. Well, if we can make them in Kansas for less, then that's what will happen. If, however, you need ruby red slippers and everything in Kansas is in black and white, well, you can't make them yourself. You have to import them.
You are making people feel so high right now. They're just like, what is happening? All right. So what are President Trump's plans regarding tariffs right now, though? Because as of today, which we're talking on Friday, the 24th, has he actually enacted anything, or is he still just threatening?
Yeah, so President Trump said that he would be levying tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China his first day in office. As with many things, he did not actually do the thing he said he would do. And so he has set additional dates that he may levy tariffs. He's talked about Canada and Mexico facing 25% tariffs on February 1st. He's blaming them for not limiting migration and fentanyl shipments into the United States. And he's also floated tariffs on Russia if it doesn't end the war in Ukraine. He's also talked about an additional 10% tariff on China. He levied tariffs during his last administration, and the Biden administration largely left those in place. The problem with I wouldn't say that's a problem. You may say it's a feature or a bug, but when you levy a tariff, the other country will sort of retaliate and levy their own tariffs on you, and that sort of becomes the new normal. And so then it takes some negotiations and work to bring it back down. Both sides have to kind of say, okay, I'm going to give a little, I'm going to give a little. So once they're there, they tend to stick for a while.
So Biden was just like, whatever. for 4 years about it?
Relations between the United States and China haven't been improving. And I think Democrats and Republicans share great concern over the United States' reliance on products, particularly technological products from China. So unlike many things the United States does with foreign policy and things, the president has a lot of leeway in setting tariffs. So this is something he can do unilaterally.
Man, it's just too bad. It's almost like we stopped making products in the U.S., you know? I don't know, Mike. I don't know how that happened.
Well, that's been a big weakness, that it turns out that products that are very labor intensive were cheaper to make overseas, and we kind of got addicted as a country to cheap products that we could get at Walmart and buy on Amazon. And so now we're sort of seeing about unwinding that. Certainly that's President Trump's goal, is to make us less reliant on all kinds of products that are made overseas at the expense, potentially, of American jobs.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to this possible tariff happening February 1st, which is the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. How would these tariffs specifically impact Oregon's economy?
Yeah, so Canada, Mexico, China, they're all major Oregon trading partners. Oregon is a little different from many states. We're a very trade-dependent state. I'll say we're a blue-collar state. We talked about factory jobs going away. Well, we've lost factory jobs in Oregon over the decades, but at a much slower rate than the nation as a whole. And we export $30 billion in products annually. We say Canada and Mexico, but I'll throw China in there too. Our main export, our primary export is semiconductors, electronics. And if we impose tariffs on other countries' products coming into the United States, it's very likely that those countries will impose tariffs on our products going into their countries.
And Intel's already struggling.
Yeah, Intel's already a little on the ropes. So anything that raises the cost of U.S. products going to other countries will tend to diminish United States manufacturing, because it will be cheaper to make the products somewhere outside the United States. I think Intel, the last time around with the tariffs, Intel said, well, we kind of have a little bit of an out, because Intel makes chips in Oregon and Arizona, but it also makes them in Israel and Ireland. And so it has a little bit of flexibility as far as where it makes them and, where it sends them. It's potentially...
I'm sorry, Israel. That's great.
Yeah.
They're just like, we should also open something up in Ukraine.
Well,
you know what? Let's just go to Congo. Let's just figure out other very stable places that we can start doing business in. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, well, there's a certain vulnerability there, and I think Intel has been more conscious of that these past couple of years. But yeah, a trade war, it ultimately can achieve the opposite of what you were aiming for. Now, if the other country didn't reciprocate with retaliatory tariffs, then it's all well and good. Then, hey, we just won't be importing products from that country. We'll get it from elsewhere. We'll make it ourselves. But we do make things in the United States. We do make things in Oregon. I mentioned semiconductors, but Boeing has a big facility here. Precision cast parts makes heavy metal parts for generators and aircraft, things like that.
I thought we were like wheat, wine, fruit, hazelnuts, wood, stuff like that.
Exactly. Well, these are our signature industries. They are not as large in dollar terms as the others, but in certain parts of the state, yes. Wheat is a primary export for us, wheat and grains. Hazelnuts are a signature Oregon product, and wine is very much wrapped up in our identity. And so if it gets more expensive to sell those products, these are all things that are also made other places in the world. The United States is not the only place where you can get wine from. The other countries sell it too. So.
Yeah, but I'm not asking specifically how would Oregon be screwed? Not like, let's balance this with the rest of the world. I'm just caring just about us. Big O here.
I think the list of things you listed there are products that Oregon makes, that if there are tariffs that other countries impose, reciprocal tariffs, following tariffs that the United States imposes, that would be hurt. Our agricultural products, our hazelnuts, you can also get them from Turkey. Wheat grown in many places in the world, and wine. Those are things that would hurt us.
Yeah, so would things like layoffs, Because you just said, like, you explained, like, hey, the way that these manufacturers try to combat these tariffs is sometimes they're like, well, we have to cut costs somewhere to make our product cheaper. So things will pass along to the consumer. Wine for us is usually a lot cheaper because it's grown here. But I'm just wondering, like, will Oregonians have to pay more for their Pinot? Will they no longer have jobs?
Yep.
I don't want to be like doomsday, but, this is pretty real. February 1st is not that far away, and, like, this could happen.
Yeah.
And Oregon is, like you said, one of the most trade-dependent states in the entire country. So it would hit us specifically, and we're already, like, Oregon as a state is already not doing, like, A-okay,
Yeah. I should say that we went through this 5 or 6 years ago. There was something like a trade war there during Trump's last administration. And I wouldn't say that it devastated Oregon's economy. What it did is it may have disrupted the economy. And people had to make adjustments, and certain industries were hurt. Now, one thing we haven't talked about is two of Oregon's largest companies, Columbia Sportswear and Nike. They do rely on that cheap labor in Southeast Asia for products coming in. And Tim Boyle, who runs Columbia Sportswear, he's said quite unequivocally that if there's a trade war, if there are tariffs on his products coming into the country, he will respond by raising prices. Tariffs are inflationary. That's what they are. And we're still very sensitive to prices here. So there are potential risks associated with that. As I say, we went through this 5 or 6 years ago. It disrupted business. It disrupted the economy, but it didn't devastate it. The economy was in pretty good shape heading into the pandemic.
So 5 or 6 years ago, there was a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico specifically?
No, not those tariffs specifically, but there were a series of tariffs that Trump imposed the last time.
Because those are new. And, like, those are the ones that I'm like, because those are our closest trading partners.
Yep.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we return, what other possible fallouts Trump's tariffs could have on our state's economy?
Birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, whatever the occasion, it just got a little more personal with meaningful photo gifts from Shutterfly. Add a silly photo to a gold-rimmed mug for your bestie. Put your sweet puppy on a cozy fleece blanket for your teen. Gift your husband a desktop plaque featuring all the kids. Enjoy 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
So you mentioned a few of the industries that would be most affected by these possible Canadian and Mexican tariffs. Is there anything else that we missed?
I would say those are the areas that would be most hit by Oregon specifically. I think we talked about, inflationary pressures, prices going up as a result. The Federal Reserve has responded to higher prices by raising interest rates. And that's a real impact. And it's not just Oregon specific. You'd feel it everywhere. But that makes it more expensive to buy cars. That makes it more expensive to buy homes. And it makes it more expensive to finance large capital projects like apartment buildings. So ultimately, it can lead to higher rents too, even when you're trying to combat inflation. So these are things the dynamics that are sort of all across the economy. In terms of specific products, our big exports are semiconductors, heavy metal parts, aircraft parts, agricultural products like wheat, and those are all things that would be disrupted. Now, if it's not a global tariff, potentially you can find other markets for your products, but it might mean lower profits for some of the manufacturers here. There's just so many cross currents, so many dynamics. It's hard to say A is going to happen and B is going to be the result.
Gotcha.
It's probably going to be more like A is going to happen and then B, C, D, E, and F are going to be the results. And they don't all point in the same direction. So as I say, it disrupts the economy. It doesn't necessarily devastate it, but businesses will have to make adjustments if this is what happens.
Man, Mike, I want to know what to invest in. So afterwards, you want to email me some stocks.
This is something that business reporters have no more insight into than anyone else. I have all these thoughts about the future, and they're almost always wrong. I look back and I'm like, God, it's a good thing I didn't put any markers on that.
You're like, good thing I just report the news.
Well, yeah, if reporters had any, received wisdom, if we could just say, oh, we can really see, then we wouldn't be reporters. We'd be like oracles or something like that.
It's so true because people ask me, they're like, oh, who do you think is going to win? I just hold their hands. I have no idea
No.
because we're a crazy bunch.
No.
Human beings are a crazy bunch and you can't predict them. So thinking about, the possibilities, I know that there's been reports that many people across the country have been panic buying things because they're fearing the worst. Like, hey, they're thinking manufacturing. They're buying things like cars, e-bikes, tech products. But Oregon, should we start hoarding hazelnuts? Like, are there any particular?
Well, those sorts of things, since that's something we make here, hey, if the global market for hazelnuts tanks, well, then they'll just stay here and they'll get really cheap.
So we're good.
We'll have them
good.
handy. I think we saw in the pandemic that panic buying is a real thing and it can feed on itself. We'll take Tillamook cheese, for example. It all disappeared from the shelves here. It's a product made here during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. It just disappeared. But it wasn't because there wasn't Tillamook cheese. I talked to their CEO early in the pandemic. I'm like, do you have Tillamook cheese? Are we running out? There aren't any on the shelf. He said, no, our freezers and fridges are full of it. It's just it takes time to get out there. It takes time to respond. And so I think we might be looking at something similar with tariffs and trade, that if there is panic buying or if there are disruptions, there may be periods of time where products are more expensive or harder to get. Appliances are another one. A lot of manufacturing, whether those goes on in Asia. And if people do some panic buying or if tariffs are high, it becomes really expensive. It will take time for the supply chain to adjust. And the panic buying can feed into itself. I did see, this week, some tech companies are doing something like what you're describing. They're importing all their products now with anticipating that there might be tariffs and it might be more expensive to do so later. HP, which has a big presence in Corvallis and across the river in Vancouver, Washington, they don't make computers here, they make printers, but they say, we're importing a whole bunch of computers right now because we want to have them on hand in case there are these tariffs. So companies are responding. They're anticipating that this kind of thing might happen.
So they're panic buying.
Well, they're going in advance. I think their hope is, worst case scenario for them is they've got a lot of computers sitting in a U.S. warehouse for a few months while it takes some time to sell through them. And then they just won't order more to sell in the coming months. And they'll be able to manage prices and perhaps manage their own supply chain. Then it gives them a cushion to make these adjustments that we're talking about.
It's smart. Yeah. Now I'm wondering, are there any particular panic buys that you've made yourself?
No. But I try not to buy anything.
Really?
I try to just stick with what I've got, except for food.
You know what, Mike? I would have guessed that.
Yeah, I did order some slippers, but my slippers are really worn out. So that wasn't so much panic buying. It was just I didn't get any for Christmas, and I know I need some. So
no one bought you slippers for Christmas? I'm so glad you told me that, Mike. I feel like I've provided you that safe space. I can't believe your family let you down like that.
You'd think walking through the house that, the slippers are coming apart. They're really noisy. And you'd think somebody would say, those slippers are bad. He needs new ones. But no, that wasn't a panic buy. That was just, I'd better do it.
Yeah. Well, Mike, as always, we appreciate you coming on the show and talking about the economy with a bunch of ding-dongs like us. Thank you so much for explaining this stuff to us. And I wish you all the warm and fluffy slippers that you could possibly want. Did you get them already?
No, they're in the mail, supposedly.
Okay, well, I hope you get them. I hope, if anything, with these tariffs and whatever, I hope it just doesn't affect you getting your slippers.
They'll get here eventually. Unless we privatize the post office, then it might be a little unproductive.
Oh my God, that'd be so amazing. It's just to explain the downfall of America just through your slippers. Mike, there's a story for you right there.
That's what people like. These are real world things. These are things that people can identify with.
First sentence, first off, my family's a disappointment. Second, President Trump. That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate or leave us a review. It really does help us out. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.